Froze before my bedroom door, phone trembling in my hand, the screen glowing like a tiny spotlight on the impossible words that had just appeared, 72 hours. No male clothes. Live as a woman. Are you brave enough? My chest tightened, my stomach turned over, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Who sends a dare like this? Why me? And why did my first instinct feel like excitement? I stared at the reflection in my bedroom window, the familiar contours of my face staring back, the sharp jaw, the plain hoodie I'd worn every day for years, the hair that refused to look anything but messy. And yet, beneath that, I felt it, a restless curiosity I'd never acknowledged. What would it feel like to walk in a completely different skin, to be someone else for 3 full days? I opened my closet, and the world I knew unfolded, neutral t-shirts, baggy hoodies, well-worn jeans, the uniform of me. Nothing here would survive the challenge. My fingers lingered over the folded stacks of borrowed clothes from my sister, the skirts, blouses, and dresses I'd once admired from afar. Could I actually do this? My heart pounded like a drum as I reached for a soft, flowing dress, unsure if I wanted to laugh or cry at the thought of slipping into it. The first step was terrifying. Stripping off my hoodie felt like leaving a familiar fortress behind. Pulling the dress over my head, I was suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, my posture, my hands, the way the fabric brushed my skin. My reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the me I knew. It looked softer, fragile in some ways, but alive in ways I couldn't explain. For the first time, I saw curiosity in my own eyes, a flicker of something like courage. Shoes, accessories, even the faintest trace of color on my lips became part of a careful ritual. Each piece was a small rebellion, a secret thrill. I sank onto the edge of my bed, knees drawn up, staring at the reflection that both frightened and fascinated me. Outside, the world was the same as ever, oblivious to the experiment I had just begun, but inside, everything had shifted. This wasn't just a dare anymore. It was a doorway into a version of myself I had never allowed. A version that might be uncomfortable, strange, even embarrassing, and yet, one that felt intensely real. 72 hours. 3 days of walking in someone else's shoes, of testing boundaries I hadn't even known I had. And as I finally exhaled, gripping the edge of the bed like a lifeline, I realized, I was terrified. But for the first time, I was also excited. I froze before my bedroom door, phone trembling in my hand, the screen glowing like a tiny spotlight on the impossible words that had just appeared, 72 hours. No male clothes. Live as a woman. Are you brave enough? My chest tightened, my stomach turned over, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Who sends a dare like this? Why me? And why did my first instinct feel like excitement? I stared at the reflection in my bedroom window, the familiar contours of my face staring back, the sharp jaw, the plain hoodie I'd worn every day for years, the hair that refused to look anything but messy. And yet, beneath that, I felt it, a restless curiosity I'd never acknowledged. What would it feel like to walk in a completely different skin, to be someone else for 3 full days? I opened my closet, and the world I knew unfolded, neutral t-shirts, baggy hoodies, well-worn jeans, the uniform of me. Nothing here would survive the challenge. My fingers lingered over the folded stacks of borrowed clothes from my sister, the skirts, blouses, and dresses I'd once admired from afar. Could I actually do this? My heart pounded like a drum as I reached for a soft, flowing dress, unsure if I wanted to laugh or cry at the thought of slipping into it. The first step was terrifying. Stripping off my hoodie felt like leaving a familiar fortress behind. Pulling the dress over my head, I was suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, my posture, my hands, the way the fabric brushed my skin. My reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the me I knew. It looked softer, fragile in some ways, but alive in ways I couldn't explain. For the first time, I saw curiosity in my own eyes, a flicker of something like courage. Shoes, accessories, even the faintest trace of color on my lips became part of a careful ritual. Each piece was a small rebellion, a secret thrill. I sank onto the edge of my bed, knees drawn up, staring at the reflection that both frightened and fascinated me. Outside, the world was the same as ever, oblivious to the experiment I had just begun, but inside, everything had shifted. This wasn't just a dare anymore. It was a doorway into a version of myself I had never allowed. A version that might be uncomfortable, strange, even embarrassing, and yet, one that felt intensely real. 72 hours. 3 days of walking in someone else's shoes, of testing boundaries I hadn't even known I had. And as I finally exhaled, gripping the edge of the bed like a lifeline, I realized, I was terrified. But for the first time, I was also excited. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted in a way I hadn't expected. Not physically, though my legs ached from sandals I wasn't used to, but mentally, emotionally, every nerve in my body felt raw. Each interaction, each glance, each step outside had carved a new awareness into me. I sank onto the edge of my bed, letting the soft folds of the dress settle around me, and stared at my reflection. She wasn't the same timid figure from this morning. There was something bolder now, though fragile, and it made my chest ache. Dinner was a minefield. My parents chatted about mundane things, unaware of the experiment I was living. I felt every word, every laugh, every sideways glance amplified. Could they tell? Would they care? My fingers drummed nervously on the table as I tried to match their casual tone, to act like this wasn't monumental. But inside, I was juggling panic, embarrassment, and a surprising thrill. With every bite, I was reminded that this wasn't just clothing, it was an identity I was stepping into, layer by layer, heartbeat by heartbeat. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out a compact mirror and traced the line of my jaw, the arch of my eyebrows, the unfamiliar softness of my features in this light. I whispered to the reflection, almost laughing at myself, "Who are you?" And the reflection seemed to answer, not with words, but with presence. She was patient, curious, daring me to explore further. I realized something profound then: the challenge wasn't just external. It was a test of my own perception, my courage, my ability to let go of old definitions. I tried a few different hairstyles, brushing my hair just so, tilting my head to see how it framed my face. It felt indulgent, even silly, yet liberating. The way the dress flowed, the way my movements adapted, it was choreography I hadn't known I could perform, a dance between who I was and who I was pretending to be. And then came the text. Another reminder from the friend who started it all: "How's my girl doing?" My stomach twisted, my pulse quickened. I laughed nervously, heart hammering, because yes, my girl. The phrase felt foreign, yet almost comforting, a secret validation of the version of me I was discovering. I typed back something vague, careful not to admit how deeply this challenge had already shaken me. But inside, I was smiling, a little, at the thought that maybe, for the first time, someone else was seeing me, really seeing me, beyond the facade I wore every day. By midnight, I was curled up in bed, reflecting on the hours I'd survived. Each encounter, each glance, each nervous step had chipped away at my fear, leaving a residue of pride I couldn't have imagined this morning. The dress lay softly around me, a symbol now, not of disguise, but of courage. 3 days still loomed ahead, and I knew the next hours would test me more than I wanted to admit, but for the first time, I felt like I could rise to the challenge. And more than that, I wondered if I wanted to. Morning came faster than I expected, the soft light spilling into my room like an unspoken challenge. I had slept fitfully, dreams tangled with unfamiliar emotions, shadows of anxiety brushing against small glimpses of excitement. Pulling on another carefully chosen outfit, a floral blouse paired with a skirt I'd once laughed at for being too girly, I felt the familiar tingle of self-consciousness. Every movement, every gesture, carried weight now. This wasn't just a dare. It was an experiment on me, and the world didn't know it. The first test arrived sooner than I anticipated. My neighbor, Mrs. Klein, popped by with a casual wave, her eyes scanning me in a way that made my stomach lurch. Did she notice? I forced a calm smile, nodding politely as I handed her a cup of tea, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. Inside, I was a storm, embarrassment, fear, and a weird thread of pride all tangled together. She left without a comment, but the relief that surged through me was almost euphoric. If I could survive these ordinary interactions, maybe I could survive the rest. By midday, the world outside became an unpredictable arena. Every glance, every stray smile or frown, felt magnified. Even simple things, walking down the street, ordering lunch, felt like performances. I found myself adjusting my posture constantly, brushing an imaginary speck from my skirt, practicing subtle smiles in reflection after reflection. I caught a glimpse of myself in a shop window and froze, staring at someone who looked familiar yet utterly new. My heartbeat sped, and I realized I was holding my breath. And then, slowly, a small smile crept across my face. I looked confident. Fragile, yes, but confident. Lunch with a friend I hadn't planned to see turned into an emotional crucible. Casual conversation felt loaded, and every laugh, every gesture, felt like a subtle test. I noticed the way he glanced at me, the slight tilt of his head, and for a second panic surged. Had I gone too far? But as the conversation continued, a surprising thing happened. I relaxed. Not fully, but enough to realize that the fear had weight, yes, but it didn't control me. I could exist here, in this body, in this skin, and people could still treat me normally. Back at home, I sank onto my bed, skirt pooling around me, and caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. There she was again, the stranger I was becoming, familiar now, almost comforting. I ran my fingers along my jaw, tracing the soft curve that yesterday had shocked me. This mirror, this reflection, had become a companion, a silent witness to every small victory, every quiet terror. I realized then that the challenge was more than clothing. It was courage, it was identity, it was learning to exist in a version of myself I'd ignored for too long. As night fell, exhaustion returned, heavier than before. Yet this time, it carried something else, anticipation. Only one more day remained. And though fear still flickered in my chest, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving. I was evolving. The third morning felt different. There was a weight in the air, heavier somehow, as if the challenge itself had grown aware of my presence. I woke with a flutter in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and dread. 72 hours. One day left. Every nerve in my body seemed sharper, each movement more deliberate. I pulled on a soft lavender dress, letting the fabric slide over my skin with a strange reverence, almost as if it were armor for the battles ahead. The moment I stepped outside, I realized just how much I had changed. Heads turned, not mockingly, not cruelly, but with curiosity, the subtle acknowledgement that something about me was different. And the truth hit me hard. I had started to believe in this version of myself. The reflection I had once feared now demanded recognition, not concealment. Yet fear still clung stubbornly to the edges of my mind. Would it be accepted? Could I truly inhabit this skin for the final stretch? Running errands that day became a test of endurance. Each glance from strangers, each unexpected smile, each minor interaction felt like a spotlight on my soul. I caught myself adjusting my hair reflexively, smoothing the dress, tilting my chin in ways I hadn't before. At one point, a cashier complimented my outfit, and a jolt of joy and embarrassment collided in my chest. I laughed softly, feeling my face flush, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to bask in the recognition without shame. It was intoxicating, but it also terrified me. What if this thrill ended, and I had to return to the familiar confines of me? Later, in the quiet of a cafe, I caught sight of my reflection in the window again. This time, I didn't flinch. She, the reflection, the stranger, the me, looked back with a steady confidence I hadn't imagined I could own. I traced the line of my cheek, the arch of my brows, and the curve of my lips, and a profound realization struck me. I wasn't pretending anymore. This was exploration, yes, but it was also authenticity. The fear was still there, lingering in the edges, but it had begun to bow to pride, curiosity, and a budding self-acceptance I never expected. That night, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted but exhilarated. The challenge had pushed me past the point of mere performance. It had stripped away the armor I had carried for years, leaving raw emotions, trembling courage, and a clarity I couldn't ignore. The reflection in the mirror no longer startled me, it greeted me like an old friend I had been afraid to meet. Tomorrow, the final stretch, would bring its own trials. But I felt ready now. Terrified, yes. Vulnerable, yes. But ready. The last day arrived with a strange stillness. I woke before sunrise, the world outside quiet and expectant, almost holding its breath with me. The dress I chose felt heavier than before, not in weight, but in meaning. Lavender again, soft and flowing, a color that had become a companion rather than a costume. I traced my fingers over the fabric, a subtle ritual that had grown comforting over the last 2 days. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for the first time, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who had endured, explored, and begun to understand herself in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Stepping outside was surreal. I walked slowly, feeling the rhythm of my steps, the gentle sway of the dress, the small confidence that had quietly rooted itself in me. Faces passed by, some curious, some indifferent, and for the first time, I didn't care. Their reactions were irrelevant. I had spent 72 hours learning to exist in this form, in this version of myself, and that was validation enough. My heart, once tight with fear, now beat with a tentative joy. But the challenge wasn't just about external appearances. Alone in a park later, I sat on a bench, legs crossed delicately, hands in my lap, and reflected on how much had shifted internally. I realized the anxiety that had dominated the first day had transformed into self-awareness, pride, and even affection for this identity I had been too scared to explore. The mirror, the dress, the careful gestures, all of it had taught me patience with myself, courage in vulnerability, and a strange, liberating freedom. A friend messaged me again, teasing about how girly I was acting, but I felt a quiet amusement instead of embarrassment. I texted back with ease, something playful and confident, a tone I would never have dared before. The last hours became almost celebratory, a dance of small victories, sitting in cafes, walking through streets, even laughing at my own reflection when a breeze lifted the hem of my dress just so. Each moment was a quiet affirmation of the transformation I had undergone, not just in appearance, but in how I felt, thought, and carried myself. As night fell, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror for the final time before the challenge would technically end. I ran my fingers along the curve of my jaw, the arch of my eyebrows, the softness of my lips, and allowed myself a long, steady look. I whispered, almost to myself, "You did this. You survived. You grew." And in that whisper, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, pride, and acceptance. The fear that had gripped me so tightly had loosened, replaced with a profound understanding. This challenge had been more than a dare, it had been an awakening. The moment finally arrived. 72 hours exactly. I stood in front of my closet one last time, the clothes I'd chosen spread out like relics of an experience that had already changed me. Part of me wanted to strip it all away, to return to the hoodie, the jeans, the safety of me. But another part, stronger now, hesitated. I ran my fingers over the soft lavender dress, the skirt I had learned to move in, and realized something I hadn't dared admit: I didn't want to completely leave this behind. I caught my reflection in the mirror and froze. Not with fear this time, but with awe. The stranger I had first met on day one had grown into someone I recognized, someone I understood, someone I could respect. Her eyes held the courage of 1,000 small victories, the nervous walks through crowded streets, the trembling steps in front of friends and family, the quiet moments alone with the mirror where fear met curiosity, and pride emerged. I smiled softly, a tear escaping unbidden. 72 hours had tested me, terrified me, exhilarated me, but it had also taught me something invaluable: identity isn't just what you show the world, it's what you dare to accept within yourself. I texted my friend, the one who had started this all, with a simple dare. I survived. Anne. I think I grew. The reply came almost instantly, told you. You're amazing. I laughed, a full, genuine laugh that shook something free inside me. For the first time in years, I felt completely present in my own skin, even if that skin was a version of me I had never imagined before. That night, as I slid into bed, still in the lavender dress, I let my mind wander through the last 3 days. Every fear, every glance, every stumble had led me here. I realized that the challenge had been more than clothing, more than identity, it had been courage. It had been exploration. It had been freedom. And in that freedom, I had discovered a part of myself I would never forget. I closed my eyes and smiled, letting the exhaustion and exhilaration wash over me. Tomorrow, I could return to my everyday wardrobe, to my familiar routines, to the me everyone expected. But a part of this self, the brave, curious, unapologetic self, would remain. The reflection in the mirror would never be quite a stranger again. And somehow, that thought made everything worth it.